good evening to all, and welcome to this special edition of the official companion podcast to HBO's The Last of Us, brought to you by the Chatter After, where we chat and seek the art beyond the clickers. I am Brandon, and I'm accompanied by my co host, Mike Thomas.
Hey, Brandon, it's been a long road, but we finally got to the end here. It's insane.
It couldn't have been for nothing.
Everything happens for a reason.
Yes. And here we are, episode 9, Look for the Light, the season finale of HBO's The Last of Us, but also the final episode that covers the entirety of The Last of Us Part 1 video game. It is what a monumental success this show has been, what a monumental run, and what a phenomenal and great finale. And of course, we that know the game and now that have seen the show know that this is one of the most controversial endings of any story in the last 10 years. And I can't wait to start digging into the things that the show have expanded on this episode, and also the things that they got perfect to the T. Even violently poetically of The Last of Us,
Yes.
its story, and its characters. As usual, here in every episode of Beyond the Clickers, we're going to start with some interesting news. Mike has a piece of news. I have a piece of theory that we're going to share, and then we're going to jump into the episode because of how faithful to the actual source material it is. We're kind of going to mix and blend the Easter eggs portion with the actual episode coverage, and hopefully you guys enjoy this episode and that mix. This episode, we loved it. I mean, because we love The Last of Us, we have a lot to say about this. But don't worry, here we're going to break down the episode in its entirety, but keep a lookout on the channel because we're also going to dedicate a special video explaining into detail the consequences or the possible consequences or the reasons behind that ending and and the things that ending entails. So we're having an ending explained video for The Last of Us season 1 as well. So let's jump in. Mike, you said you had a piece of news you wanted to share. Let's jump right into that.
Yeah, so as everybody who's listening knows, this is a pre-recorded episode this time instead of a live. So I wanted to show you guys this news that came in that The Last of Us video game and series is going to be like the most well-regarded, most highly reviewed adaptation in video game ever. Which shocker, I know, right? We kind of saw that coming after the first couple of episodes. But as you see here, the TV adaptation is currently sitting at an average of 9.1 on IMDb. The video game is sitting at an average of 9.7. And so combined, they are 9.4 in total. So, like, this is the most highly regarded piece of video game content ever made. And the stats are really interesting. Again, shout out to Robert, who was able to send me this information before the finale dropped. The Last of Us is the most successful adaptation. The Witcher and Arcane are trailing behind it. But the crazy part is that, again, T. Lou is sitting at a 9.1. The Witcher is sitting at an 8.1. So there's a whole star difference between 1 and 2. And yeah, Arcane is not too far behind because, again, since they're averaging the game and the show, Arcane's show is actually more regarded than highly regarded than the game
Yeah,
itself.
yeah.
So that kind of knocks it at like a 8.1 average rating. Also, this is for Brett. Thank you for joining us for the show, man. We appreciate having you on for as long as you were here. Congrats on the baby. The Legend of Zelda is
Congrats.
in the top 10.
Nice.
Excuse me, princess. I feel like the games are doing the heavy lifting with that one, though.
Yo. That was a shout out to Brett and a punch to Isaac. It was a little
I
bit of
I love when that works out, you know? Just the chat after family, everybody got in on the action with this one. But yeah,
yes,
so
yes.
Last of Us, Witcher, Arcane, Castlevania, and then Halo are like the top 5 uh best series according to the critics and the fans over at IMDb, which is a little more consistent than Rotten Tomatoes. So take that for what it's worth. I think that's pretty good, especially ending out on a high note with this episode.
Nice, nice. That's a great piece of news. I mean, it's phenomenal. It's amazing that because this is the not only was this a phenomenal adaptation, and
Mhm.
it is confirmed to be an amazing show in and of itself, right? But think about this. It it was the one adaptation that everybody was concerned about. It was the one adaptation that everyone was afraid they were not going to do it right. So I'm glad that all the original iterations of it did not go through. I'm glad that Neil Druckmann stuck to his guns,
Yes.
similar to how Neil Gaiman did the same thing with Sandman, where he said that in the past, every time he tried to make it, they were trying to take it another direction. And he said, no, please do not do this. Do not do this. And finally, we got the phenomenal Netflix's The Sandman, which was amazing and so faithful to the actual source material. I'm glad that we got this with The Last of Us because it not only does it set a bar, which again is a very high bar, and yes, we have to agree, Craig Mazin cheated by picking the easiest or best story of all. But at the same time, they knew what to look for. They knew what to expand on. They knew what to leave alone. They knew what to cut out, and they knew what to focus on. So I think it's not about it being just The Last of Us, right? It really shows us that it takes a creative team that understands the source and understands how it should be translated. Because I think what the thing that we noticed the most is that they knew what the Bible was. They knew what the roadmap looked like. They
Yes.
understood this needs to happen, this can move around, this needs to stay. They were able to put themselves in the fans' shoes and also understood where fans are holding too close to it. but but most of us were delighted that they decided to move far from it, right? So
Yeah.
they were able to, it's like anything, they were able to read the tea leaves, and most, like, instead of being blatantly, oh, screw the fandom, screw the source, I'm just gonna do my own thing, they understood how important it was to take it seriously. And I have a feeling that even if Neil wasn't involved for whatever reason, the way Craig as a creator works, it took to the point that Craig understood that if this was going to work, Neil had to be there.
Yeah, I
Which
think
again, it's another, yeah.
that's the biggest testament, right? You're saying like if Neil wasn't there, that's the thing. Craig knows Neil needed to be there.
Yeah.
And that's
Understood
what
that.
he understood that, right? And that's what makes this entire thing perfect. Like I said this a couple months back, and when I did
Yes,
the review, it's a perfect adaptation
it
because
is.
they were able to keep everything we needed. We got our giraffes, right? We got
Yes.
Ellie breaking David's finger. We got you have no
Hey,
idea
hey, hey,
what
hey.
loss is.
Ellie's David fucking finger. Okay, say it right.
Yeah, I'm paraphrasing, but good job. We got, all these iconic moments that are integral to what us as fans think of The Last of Us. But then we couple that with new moments. We have Bill and Frank, right? We have Left Behind, which a lot of people never even played. So that was a new
Right.
experience for them.
Yep.
We got to expand on Tess's relationship with Joel. Like they were able to keep, like you said, follow that Bible, but also say, hey, we can deviate here a little bit. We can add new layers to Sam and Henry here. And
Yep.
it just makes it, as a fan of the games, so entertaining. And I love that people who haven't played the games got to, in my opinion, experience the ultimate version of The Last of Us. This
Yes.
is the director's cut, really.
Yes. Very Isayama.
Yes.
Yes. 100%. 100%. And before we jump in,
Yeah.
great piece of news, Mike. Thank you for bringing that. I have a theory, and I think I saw a thumbnail somewhere, but I don't know how official it is. I never saw the article, I never read it, but I noticed something that I think I'm right. I may be wrong. I think I'm very right. I
I'm
saw
interested to hear
something.
what this is.
I think Laura Bailey's in this episode. I think she's one of the
Hmm.
nurses.
You mean she has a face mask on and we can't tell?
Yes. And
Dang it.
I noticed it because she has very distinct facial features, especially
Mhm.
in her, like, her eyes are very distinct. And when I saw it the first time, it flew over my mind. And now that I kind of glimpsed them and I saw the episode. I'm looking at her, at the nurse, and I'm like, that's Laura freaking Bailey. I have a feeling like she has the head of hair. You know what I mean? Like, and to me, that was like, and those that know why
Wow.
that's important know why that's important. It's not important right now, but it's very important. But I found it so
Yeah.
interesting if it is her. I have a feeling that if it is her in the HBO podcast when it comes out on Monday, I think wait when people listen to it, which we haven't had a chance to because this is premiering or coming out as soon as the episode drops. After
Right.
the episode drops, um, I'm pretty confident they'll confirm it, but but I may be wrong. But I kind of felt that there, and I found this so interesting.
You're not. I don't think you're wrong because now that you mentioned it, like I was very keen on the nurses in that scene for a very specific reason. But now that you mention it, yeah, one of them did feel a little familiar.
Yes.
And it could just be they favor Laura Bailey. That's very big possibility. But
Right.
yeah, I mean, it's like when Daniel Craig was a stormtrooper in The Force Awakens. Of course,
Yes.
that could be a possibility.
Yes. Yes. And I think this leads to the greatest meta cameo of all, right? Everybody knew that Troy Baker was going to have a role.
Hmm.
Everybody knew that Tommy was going to have a role. Well, I think I was surprised that Tommy had a role. Everybody knew that Marlene was coming back to play Marlene. Meryl Dindridge rocking it, slaying it as Marlene.
Yeah.
And we knew that Ashley Johnson was coming in. And for those that don't know who Ashley Johnson is OG Ellie. And she's back, but she's not just back. She plays Anna, Ellie's mother.
Anna
And
Williams.
and that's how the episode starts. Not just with Anna played by Ashley Johnson, but Anna running away from an infected, from a runner, running into her house while having contractions because she's in freaking labor. And she fights off an infected, gets bitten just as she gives birth to Ellie. So
Yeah.
so video game Ellie has given birth to HBO Ellie.
It's so meta.
You can't get any more meta than that. But I think even though it was a moment full of tension, I think it adds so many layers to the story, right? And we get the origin of the Switchblade. We
Hmm.
get that moment how Marlene knows Ellie. We know that Marlene was the one that dropped her off at. I mean, we get the line drop in the first episode, but now we know how we got to that point and why Ellie still has the Switchblade because it was given to her because she was dropped off at Fedra with the Switchblade. But also, you get that moment, that beautiful moment, the most beautiful lines you can ever hear is you tell him, you tell him, Ellie. Like Anna saying that about her daughter as she's screaming after being born into this broken world. It's like, bro, that just, it got me, bro.
It's one of those things that we theorized for a long time, right? Like even in our well, my pre-coverage for Collider, I wrote a cast and character guide before the series came out.
Yep.
And in the section I had Ashley Johnson is going to be in the show, and there's a lot of speculation that she will play Ellie's mother.
Yeah.
So we kind of had an idea and a feeling that that might be the case, but seeing it unfold, right? Something that Christian, who joined us for the last episode, on his podcast, he keeps saying like, "When is Ashley Johnson going to show up? I need to know what is her role." Like
Now you know.
now we know, but in this context, it's heartbreaking, and it speaks to what The Last of Us is, right?
Yeah.
One thing that stuck out to me from this moment is when Anna gets bit. She she didn't cut the umbilical cord, but she tells Marlene that she did.
Yes.
And again, people, again, it ties to the end. You lie for love. You lie to protect those you love, and it makes you do crazy things. Because what does an infected baby look like? Like, would that have? Who
Right.
she has no idea what's going to happen,
Right. And not
and
even
she,
then. And
yeah,
remember, a bite on the leg is that type of infection vector area. That is the slowest vector for infection.
Mhm.
So we don't even know till we meet till Joel meets Marlene towards the end, towards the latter half of the episode, that the fungus did make it to the baby.
Yeah.
Like you could think that that didn't happen, right? Because you never see any reactions, right? And she really did cut the umbilical cord as soon as he was bitten. But it looks like something did make it to Ellie. And I think that also makes it very interesting because it kind of makes the explanation of her immunity a lot more grounded,
Mhm.
because it does make a certain amount of sense from a scientific standpoint. I'm not a scientist, but in the little that I've seen of movies and documentaries,
It
it's like
makes movie sense at least.
it makes the movie sense that okay, they both were raised together, hence why the cordyceps in her body, in her brain, send those signals of, hey, we're already part of the hive.
Well, it makes sense in a way simply because it was an indirect infection, right? Like they
Yeah,
didn't bite her. It went through her bloodstream in a non-conventional way. So I can see it having a different reaction, especially
right,
since she's literally like 2 seconds old when this
right,
happens.
right.
So the idea that her body quickly adapts to it is again very science fiction way of explaining it.
Yeah,
Explaining it. I don't know if there's a real life explanation that makes sense from all of this, but there's enough logic there to where I'm not
yes,
laughing at it.
yes,
So
yes.
that to me though, because I know that by the time people are watching this, you have a video out explaining the ending. But I have a video, and this is the first you're hearing of this, explaining why Ellie isn't infected. And this is a thing that in the fandom we've always kind of questioned because they never really got into that in the Last of Us games, right? How are you feeling about this new development? Because for a good 10 years, we didn't have that question answered.
I like it. I like it because it makes sense in the world. I like because it makes
Mm,
sense in the world, right? It makes sense for that character, but it also highlights how unique she is, and
yes.
also kind of dials down, because it really makes Joel's lie worse
Hmm.
because she is that unique. And because she is that unique, it makes Joel's lie a lot worse. You know what I mean? And that's just the
Yeah.
whole thing to me, because it's
You
not
can
just
never recreate this event,
exactly,
you know?
exactly. And that's the whole thing. Like, and Ellie's smart, right? Ellie
Hmm.
understands enough, or maybe thinks she understands enough to see beyond what Joel is saying. But I like how they're treating the audience as smart. They're not trying to put it over our heads. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Ellie is unique. Ellie is special. There is a reason why she has to be the one, why she is the key. And it adds a lot more weight to the things that happen. So I like how that revelatory piece of information it's just it's not just a it's not a hole for a plot hole for a plot. You know what I mean? It's not a plot hole. It's not like you're trying to cover a hole. It's purposeful because it adds weight to everything else. And I think that's
Yeah.
super smart.
Yeah. For me, it makes total sense. One thing that again in storytelling, sometimes you just don't really care. Like knowing how Ellie is immune, I never really cared about that.
It didn't matter. Yeah,
It
the
didn't
story
really
was more
matter.
about the characters. Yeah,
Right. But I appreciate it because it does break the chosen one type of trope. Because, like, why is Ellie the only person we've ever come in contact with that is this way?
right,
And I think this revelation, again, like you were saying, it's very believable.
right.
And so, and like I was just saying, you can't recreate this event. Like, you would have to infect a woman
It's a fact.
during childbirth and hope that it's the same. Like nobody's ever gonna do that. That's too big of a risk. So
Yeah,
like this is where only opportunity. Ellie is a one of a kind type of person, but it's not destiny, it's not fate. It's just they got really lucky.
Yep.
And like you
Yeah,
said, it makes this even worse.
and when you think about it, how many scientific discoveries are a result of once in a lifetime occurrences? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? There is plenty of them, right? So this feels like a one of those eureka moments that just makes sense in this world. But also makes me think about this. Let's say that they're successful in extracting these pieces, these messengers, these chemical messengers, which by the way, I kind of digged the scientific mumbo jumbo they try to these chemical fungal messengers. The only way they can really figure out that it works is by forcibly having people get infected and see if they don't turn. So there's a lot of trial and error. It's you know what I mean. So kind of like
They might be able to test it out on mice or something, but yeah.
right. No, but that's the thing though. Really, you don't see any infected animals. So do
I
the
know.
cordyceps even grow on animals? It's
Yeah, I mean, well, in episode
there's a lot
1,
there's a lot of
it's a lot of unanswered question. That's again from the video game
yeah,
standpoint. I always kind of understood that there's so much risk. Is it worth this kid dying for nothing?
interesting.
But the show adds so much extra weight to everything to where you're just like, I
Yeah,
think I feel differently about this than I did the first time.
yes. And also Marlene, Meryl Gendrich,
Yes.
delivery and presentation. Having that scene with Anna, like Anna gives Marlene her final request: take Ellie, get it to someone to take care of her, and kill me. I mean, Anna's just not someone that Marlene knew. Anna's
Yeah.
her best friend, someone that's been Marlene. Anna is Marlene's Ellie to her Riley. You know what I mean? It's something like serious. But then she's able, which is what makes her such a capable leader, I would say.
Yep.
She's able to make the rational decision. She's able to make the rational decision of, I have to do this for the greater good, no matter what shape it looks like, you know? So she does kill Anna, which again, heartbreaking. And she does give the go ahead to sacrifice Ellie
Mhm.
because it's the right thing to do. So, but all of it is from the rationale of she loves the world. The world deserves a chance. And it's like she kills Anna out of love, but then she sacrifices Ellie for love of the world. And even then, it's not even a sure thing. But she's been
No.
fighting for so long that she needs to. It couldn't have been for nothing. Like it all goes back to like if Ellie feels this way, it's no surprise Marlene feels this way. Like when we meet her for the first time, she's also already like, what is this for? And it's not till she meets Ellie that
Reignites.
reconnects with Ellie
Yep.
that she kind of feels like, okay, there's something here. And think about this. She knows that Anna got bit. So what if that's another factor for Marlene being convinced of Ellie's immunity?
Yeah. She's the
Which
only person who has all of the information. And I
yep.
think, again, that's why I know we kind of are jumping straight to the end of the episode as opposed to going through beat by beat like we usually do, but that's because it all ties back around to that
Right.
opening sequence
Right.
of she has all of the information, something that nobody outside of Joel and maybe the couple nurses at the end of this episode know.
Yeah.
So that plays a big factor in her actions here, and I just love how we were able to convey that in such a satisfying way. This is the shortest episode of The Last of Us. This is the shortest episode of the entire season,
And they
but it
didn't
feels
miss
like
anything.
they covered all their bases. They didn't miss
Yep.
anything. They added new information, and it's so good, dude. It's so good.
Yep. So let's keep going with the timeline. So
Yeah.
Ellie's cries as a baby are beautifully edited into Ellie, 14-year-old Ellie, being zoned out because when we meet her now, I mean, this is probably maybe a month after the David incident.
Yeah.
She knows she's at Salt Lake City. She
It's
doesn't
enough for Joel to be up and about.
right, and Joel is super dad right now. Like
Yes.
we know their relationship has grown to this point. And but Ellie is, first of all, we got to remember Ellie's tough. Ellie's a smartass. She can be an asshole, but she's a freaking kid. And she literally has the weight of the world. That's a Superman quote. She has the weight of the world on her shoulders right now because of
Yes.
everything that she's done. She's replaying all this. It's like it's like everything we've seen from episode 1, like she's reviewing the season in her head, right?
Hmm.
And she's just, wow, we're at the end. We're at the final stretch.
To
And
make the reference, this is her swing, and she is having her Naruto flashback.
yep, yep. Ba-ba-da-da-da-da. Oh wait, no. Da 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 dee, da da da
Yes,
da.
it's sadness and sorrow.
Yes. Wait, damn it, Christian. Where's your soundboard? Kudos, Film Optics. So I love how more than once she kind of it's like blacked out and like she's just so lost in thought that
Hmm.
Joel reaches out to her. Hey, I found the Chef Boyardee. Have you ever played Boggle? I've never played Boggle. Have you ever played Boggle?
Yeah.
Okay, I think I need to play Boggle. So, so
Yeah. It's like you said, it's a word game. Scrabble's better, but it's okay.
yes, but I do love the fact that I find it funny that one of the production companies is Word Games. Um, this whole shot, the street, the signs, the cars, it's literally almost identical to the game. You even
Hmm.
go into an RV and you see a family that has just called it quits because of how bad it's been.
Yeah.
Um, you don't find Chef Boyardee, you find ammo, but but
Well.
no. It's just like the game. They're walking around, um, and Joel is being literally embracing 100% the super dad, right? He's really at that point. Ellie, it's not that she's not interested, but she's really going through it, right? Everything's going through her head. Um, I love the whole thing of him. I Faye, we blast with this wall. I found some dynamite in the RV. That was pretty hilarious. That was a great
Yeah.
moment. And then
I
as
just
they're
love how that small interaction shows how long they've been doing this to
yeah,
where Joel says, I've been thinking, and Ellie just tells what the plan is. Like,
yeah,
yeah, I know the drill. And that's why he gets the roles are reversed. He's now the smartass.
yes, yes. And I love the whole thing about going into the building, and we finally get the Easter egg that I didn't know I wanted, which was Joel boosting Ellie to get the ladder. That is like a deep cut from the
Yeah.
games, which again, it's never happened before. We get a little bit where he boosts a test on one episode, but literally that. And when you get that moment, just like in the game, where she sees something and just drops the ladder, which I love it because in the game, that is a very dramatic moment because you're used to just getting the ladder and going up. And you've done it
Hmm.
so many times that when she suddenly drops it, you feel the tension when Joel goes, Ellie, oh, like and
Yeah.
so I love how he's running here and trying to get there. And what she sees is that which is one of the most beautiful moments in the game that everybody and all of Tilu fandom knows. We get the giraffe, which we couldn't get the official still from the show, but this is pretty much what happens in the game. And I don't know,
Also,
man.
just this is again just the accuracy that this show has. This is a still from The Last of Us Part 1 remake on PS5. They're wearing the exact same outfit with the exact same backpack with the exact same pins
Yep.
in the
Yep.
exact same building.
Yep. And
It's
if I'm not
wild.
mistaken, in the show, it's a real giraffe.
Yes. So that's the thing that I can finally talk about. Again, they sent the screeners a few months back, and big disclaimer on the episode was visual effects are not done. And it's like, okay. So by the time we get to episode 9, I am used to seeing pre-rendered clickers. I'm used to seeing scenes that aren't spliced quite right. So when we get to the giraffe moment, I'm like, okay. And then they feed a real giraffe. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, they got a giraffe for this scene. And there are a
Yes.
couple moments where the giraffe was CG and it wasn't finished. And it's like, okay, they couldn't do all the close ups and stuff that they probably wanted to with Ellie interacting with it. But from the onset, like this shot here that they recreate was a giraffe. They were really petting a giraffe. And what's funny is everything behind them was CG. So it was a blue screen, but the giraffe was real.
What needed to be real, damn it, was real.
Yes.
Yeah, that moment of the giraffe, it's literally, you take your kid to the zoo, you want to see the freaking giraffes, but it's the touching moment, right? Like a
Hmm.
very calm before the storm, kind of, right? So I'm glad that they were able to capture this, and it looked beautiful. It was great. And then we have what the first of four very important conversations that occur. There's a lot of great dialogue. I would say a lot of great confrontational sort of dialogue, and this is one of the first ones that we get. And
A lot of tension.
yeah, and Joel literally tells Ellie like, "Hey, we don't have to do this. We can just go back to Tommy's and be done with it. You know, like there's always going to be risk. There's always going to be a problem, but we can make it home." And then
Hmm.
Ellie drops the famous lines. It's like, after everything we've been through, after everything I've done, like she's carrying the guilt. And it's not just a fact about David, you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
what happened with what she did to David is traumatizing. What happened to her too, but she's looking at her hands, that she's the reason Sam didn't make it. That's the way she sees it, right? Or like, because you got to remember,
Or that Henry offed himself to protect her. Like
yes,
that's
that's the
also a big thing where it's
that's it.
like
Yep.
she couldn't help Sam, but like Henry couldn't live with the guilt of
Yep.
protecting her over his brother.
Yep. Yep. And like Tess dying because of her, like she's Riley dying because of her. Like she's seeing all the dead bodies that this journey that has left behind. No pun intended. But
Hmm.
it's not like, not because she's been the violent one, but because of her existence. Like she sees her existence as part of the reason of the tragedy that she's been through, right?
Well, it goes back to what she said at the house, like episode 6, right? To Joel
Right.
about everyone she's ever known or has been around or cared about has left her in some form or fashion
Or died.
or
Everyone
died.
except for you, yeah.
Yeah, and that comes back to this point to where what happens next?
Right.
Does she lose Joel again? Like that's why to me one of the biggest moments is it can't all be for nothing.
Yes.
I'll follow you anywhere you go, but there's no halfway with this. We
We got to
finished
finish
what we
this. Yeah.
started, you know? And ooh,
No, and the
that makes
idea, yeah, go ahead.
that it's just the idea that Ellie wants to follow through with this because it can't be for nothing.
Right.
And then it ends up being for nothing. We'll get there.
But then again, it's also the whole thing about she going like, I'll go wherever you want after this.
Yeah.
We'll go to Jackson, to the sheep ranch, to the moon. Like I'll follow you wherever you go. Like like in a way, it's like she's telling Joel all these things, and Joel is like eating it all up, right? but it's like the contingency here is that she's able to do the thing. She needs to be able to do the thing, right?
Yes.
But then, if we thought that was the only big moment, we get an original moment in the show that was not in the game, which took me 100% by surprise. And it was only hinted at in the game. And it's hinted at in the game if you're looking for the cutscene, because if you're not looking for it, you don't hear about it. And in the game, during the Hunters arc in Pittsburgh, which of course in the show is replaced with Kansas, with Killer City and
Yeah.
Kathleen and the commune there. Um, as you're going through the hotels and trying to find a way out, right? You find a couple that committed suicide, that committed, that took themselves out
Mhm.
inside of a tub. And Ellie asked a question and she's talking to Joel about it. And Joel and Ash and Ellie literally says, um, they took the easy way out. Ellie's words. And then Joel says, trust me, it's not easy. And the game leaves it at that, but it hints that to the fact that Joel probably is talking from personal experience. In the
Right.
game, as you're going, which by the way, the whole Fedra triage thing that the army had in Salt Lake City that they walked through, that is 100% in the game. And it looks almost identical to the game. The conversation, though, is new.
Yes.
And he said, he talks about Sarah dying and him being in that triage in day two, back in wherever he was in Texas. And then he talks about that he was getting treated because of the wound that he has close to his forehead. And Ellie says, "Oh, that's about the guy that missed." And then Joel says the lines, it was me. I was the guy that missed." And then you go like,
Whew.
"Bro, I was not expecting them to do this. More so, I was not expecting him to say the words, 'It wasn't time.' It," and then Ellie
Yeah.
looks at him, and you can tell that he's literally saying, "It wasn't time that healed my wounds or that helped me move on. It was you, Ellie. It was
That
all you." That, bro.
that had me a mess. In
Yeah.
the 3 times I have watched this episode, that has me in tears every single time. And
Long, long time.
yeah, it's something that you feel watching the show. One of again, Pedro Pascal is a fantastic
Yes.
actor. He's fantastic in this show, and he deserves all the flowers, all the award nominations, all the wins he can possibly get. Because one thing I love about his performance here, and we can finally talk about it in full, is that Joel is changing throughout
Yeah.
from episode 1 to now. He's a completely different person, but it's
Yes.
not overnight. He is slowly changing episode by episode, and
Yep.
Pedro's delivering the nuances in those performances, right?
Yep.
Like, first thing he says to Ellie is that you're not family, you're cargo, right? And then we get to this moment, and it's believable because we're seeing him soften up. Like, just the fact that the episode starts and he's the chatterbox, right? He's the one trying to strike up conversations. He's the one who
Yep.
notices Ellie is a little distraught, so he's trying
Yeah.
to
He
make light of the
cares
situation.
that she's a
Yeah,
little disconnected as
yeah.
opposed to being happy that she's not talking.
And he is just like, I want to hear more bad puns. Because even though he acts like he doesn't like them, that is a bond that they have, and
Yep.
they did make him laugh. And so I love that in the game, it's a very different experience to where, again, it's a power fantasy essentially where we become Joel and
Right.
we are attached to who Ellie is. And
Right.
so they never had to say that. They never had to
Right.
put that scene in the game because as a player, if the story's doing its job, you should have already felt that.
Yeah.
And If you didn't, the game just wasn't for you. There was a massive disconnect there.
Yep.
But in the show, they have him say the line, not just for us as the audience, but for Ellie. And it fundamentally changes everything about this ending,
Yeah.
which everything is still there. The events still happen, but like the beginning, the opening with Anna, it recontextualizes a lot of the decisions going forward and a lot of what was happening prior to all of this. Like everything Ellie did dealing with David up to this moment, like Joel knows that. He notices that she almost died trying to make sure he was okay and to keep him alive. And
Yep.
that just tightens that bond even more.
Yep. Like we see him say baby girl at the end of episode 8. And it's
Yeah.
funny because I have multiple people telling me that whenever he says baby girl, they're broken.
Yeah.
Because again, the same thing you're saying. We've seen this relationship develop. We've seen this character growth, right? Throughout the entire season. It tells you how beautiful the storytelling has been for the show.
Yes.
You don't need the game. I'm saying it. Damn it. I'm saying it. You don't need it. Everything's there and then some. So it makes it the ultimate and quintessential experience. It makes it two very distinct experiences, two different ways to enjoy and enter into the world of Tilu, but both of them so legitimate and so amazing, so heartbreaking and so emotional that
Yeah.
they each stand on their own, which is why we're seeing the 9.7 on the game and the 9.1 on the show. You know,
Right.
it presents like each of them doesn't need the other to back each other up, which is what you want from adaptations re or revisiting or translating from one medium to another, right?
We didn't mention this right during that segment, but can we just 9.1 on the show when they got review bombed like multiple times this season?
Episode 3,
Yeah.
episode 7, like yeah,
Yeah. And so it's like that's either IMDb went and cleared out all the nonsense reviews, or it was just that popular where it offset it anyway.
yeah. Either way, the fact that IMDb will go through out of their way to remove the review bombers also shows how good the show is because they wanted to give it a fair rating.
Yeah.
So both versions, both outcomes are legitimate, right?
Hmm.
So after we learn of how close this relationship has become, this father-daughter duo, right? They get jumped by the fireflies that they were looking for, which
Yes.
again, a great way to cut right to the chase. Because in the game, there's a lot of gameplay after this, but I love how it goes into this where they're jumped by the fireflies. They're on patrol, and Joel awakens. I love again the cinematography is just phenomenal. Apart from the fact that the hospital freaking looks identical to the game, and I also love the fact that everything takes place in the day, so it hasn't been a bunch of hours. This is one of
Yes.
those. This is one of those episodes that I'm okay that it didn't take place at night, but I do like the fact that the moments that needed darkness are the lack of lighting of where they're at, like the scenes in the parking lot and the
The
scenes.
cinematography was great with
Yes,
this
the
one.
scenes close to the to the surgery room in the pediatric surgery area. But the idea that we start with Joel opening his eyes, trying to get a hold of himself, and the first thing you see is a firefly symbol, and the fact that we have seen this symbol consistently throughout the show, that we know that that symbol means firefly.
Down in
You
the
know,
corner.
yes. Um, so this new conversation that we have with Marlene, it's again all the brokenness that you needed is here. We
Yeah.
find out that she's taken Ellie. She refuses Joel to go see her because she's being prepped for surgery. We get the info drop that apparently the cordyceps have grown with her throughout her entire life. and these have chemical messengers that tell other cordyceps that she's already part of them, hence her immunity. And that by extracting these cordyceps, they can probably recreate these messengers and thus create a cure for the world. That's the possibility. That's the hope. And Joel, he has proven that he doesn't know everything, but he knows enough to understand that the cordyceps develop in the brain, develop
Mhm.
inside the brain. And Marlene says, yes, they do. So at that moment, they don't say it, but we all know what this means. The only way they're getting the samples they need from Ellie is by killing her and extracting her brain, which again, very zombie.
Yes. Yes. It all like it comes back down to brains, right?
Right. Brains. But Joel's gut reaction is find someone else. And Marlene talking about how tough this is, how she knows how hard the decision is. I love the encounter of ferocious love and rational love fighting with each other, because rational love, which is what Marlene is embracing or embodying, right, is like we have to do what's right. You know, we sacrifice certain things for the greater good because for the love of the people, of the suffering and all that stuff, right?
Right.
And then you have selfish, ferocious love in the body of Joel, like find someone else. And that moment when he says, when Marlene says, I don't have a choice, like this is the only way. And Joel says, but I do.
Yes. This entire last act of the story is about choice and the choices
Yeah.
that we make and how
And
that
the choices that we steal from others.
yes, like it's so fascinating how they added this scene again. It feels like the show is going, I mean this in the nicest way possible. They're going out of their way to idiot proof the story.
In the best
And
way. In the
in the
best way.
best possible way, but like
Yeah.
just thinking about how so many things, so many details that people who have played the game are discovering for the first time throughout this story. David being a cannibal and a predator. We're gonna leave it there. Bill and his relationship with Frank, to Joel literally stealing Ellie's choice, and it's not as blatant in the game, but these are all things that are important to these characters that the show is kind of doubling down on
Yeah.
in the best possible way. It's like this scene with Marlene and Joel. I love it because you're right. It's two very different types of people, and they both do love Ellie, but Marlene is willing to make that choice. But Marlene's still not in the right here either because she also robs Ellie of her choice
Yes,
of
because she
let
doesn't
her
let her wake
know.
up. Yeah, she
Right,
doesn't let her wake up to make a decision. She just makes the choice.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that again just highlights that this world is very gray. There is no black and white. And something that Brett was saying a few episodes back was when he was playing the game, he gets to this moment, he's like, am I the bad guy?
Yeah. Yeah.
And this episode nails that to where
Here's the moment where that happens, right?
this is the turn, right?
Yeah, this is
This
the turn.
is this is his villain
This is the
origin
turning.
story. Yeah, it's great, and I think that these two actors handled that scene beautifully. And when Joel says, "I have a choice," it feels like a hero moment is about to start, but it turns into a massacre.
And here's the brilliance of it. And I'm not saying that violence is brilliant. That's not what I'm trying to say. But as a storytelling tool, one of the things that we've talked about a lot, right, is the the handicap or the choice to not be as violent. in the
Hmm.
game, right? It goes out of the window here. This is pure violence. But also, I love how Craig and Neil have. By the way, this is the only episode that they both co-wrote,
Yep.
which I find interesting. And Ali Abazi, which did a phenomenal job with episode 8, also directed episode 9. I find it interesting that they made the choice from the beginning that violence needs to be story driven. Violence is a story driven, solely a, a story driving tool.
Hmm.
And I find it so interesting that when Joel begins to rebel against Marlene's forces, you're right when he says I have a choice. It's meant to feel like this hero rising, like that moment in Scott Pilgrim Against the World where he's fighting wherever the name is, and the sword comes out of his chest and he goes, "You've got the power of self confidence," or whatever.
Yeah.
Like,
It echoes the Steve Rogers "I can do this all day" type of
right,
mentality,
right.
right?
But then you have the somber and minor toned version of the lead music of the
Yeah,
main
the
theme.
the main
It's
Lazarus
all
theme.
dark. It feels evil, even, right? You don't hear the gunshots. You just see the violence. They
Yeah.
treat it like poetry. You know what I mean? Like we're just seeing it unfold, and it's visceral, it's brutal. They make it a point for you to understand that he's killing a barrage of people, and he's doing it mercilessly as well. But it's
Yeah.
done in a way that I don't know, like it highlights how it doesn't just highlight the violence, but it highlights how focused he is. Like he's making this choice not randomly, like he's driven to do what he needs to do. Like this is the moment that he's not going to fail Ellie. This is the moment that he's going to protect her no matter what. Even by the end when he recognizes that he protected her in spite of what she wanted. The idea that he's just he like I wrote it up when I finished playing part 1 of wow. When I finished playing part 1 on PS5, I took a
Mhm.
picture and I put it on Twitter and I said, "This is where he said no to loss."
Yeah. It's heartbreaking because, like you said, like it's very stylized. And
Oh,
one thing that I
did you see the modded AK by the way? The modded
yeah,
rifle? Like it has the mod similar to the game. That's
yeah,
kind of an Easter egg too. That was interesting. Sorry, go.
that's neat. One thing that really stands out in this moment is that it goes back to what you were saying about how they treat violence, right? In this story, because you see everything. Like they make sure each body that drops, we zoom in on their face. We see the car. Like there are so many people who put their hands up. They drop the weapon, and Joel shoots them anyway. And it's like it kind of reminds me. You were talking about like this is the moment where he said no to loss, right? This is the moment where things are going to be different. And that takes us back to episode 6 back at in Jackson with Tommy, right?
Yeah.
And all throughout that episode, Joel is having like panic attacks and anxiety, and he breaks down because he is afraid he'll get her killed.
Yeah.
All of that falls away here. All of that is gone. Joel believes that he's on a mission to save Ellie, and nothing is going to stop him. Nothing
Yeah.
is going to get in his way.
Nothing.
It it's beautifully done, and again, power to the showrunners, Craig Mazin, Neil Druckmann, to the directors, to Pedro Pascal, because again, that's where my brain instantly goes back to, and that's good storytelling. Is that Joel is not going to let that happen. She trusted him. She could have gone with Tommy. They could have. She could have been gone by now. Tommy
Right.
probably would have gotten her there
Right.
in a matter of days.
As soon as he leaves, he gets hurt. As soon as he leaves
Yes.
Jackson, he gets hurt, and she saves him.
Yes.
He couldn't save her from David. She had to save herself from David,
Right.
and he had to kind of emotionally save her after. Like
Yeah.
he's not going to fail again. And the fact that we know that he's failed her over and over again, this is not that time.
No. And I love that we can pick up on that as fans, but I just love how the show deliberately showcases that, but it also
It built it.
showcases
It built
it
it.
built up to it,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
the violence, this is the payoff. Because I've asked you, I've asked Christian, I've asked Brett, I've asked Destiny, I've asked Rin, everybody who's done this show with us up to this point, is the lack of action scenes damaging specific moments of the story? And I think seeing the full picture, no, but it also heightens this specific moment.
Yes. Because it's a hyper violent moment. We
Yes.
haven't seen violence. Like the only moment that rivals violence to this point,
Hmm.
it's a disconnected one, which is what we happens at the beginning of episode 5,
Right.
and that final showdown between Ellie and David. Those are the only real moments that look similar to this. You can say Joel beating that officer in episode 1 has a little bit of that, but it just shows a kernel of that paternal energy. That's really what it's doing. It's kind of giving you the precursor of the energy that he's channeling here, right?
Yes. I'm
And
glad you mentioned that moment though, because it reminds me of a very cool detail. If you're looking at this, the entire season of The Last of Us, I believe the first episode is "If You're Lost in the Darkness," right? And then this last one is
look for the light.
right. So it all comes back around. That energy, that violent rage that was inside of Joel, the
Yeah.
very moment he meets Ellie and protects Ellie,
Yeah.
he brutally murders someone.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
here, this time again, he's not
He's
going to let
looking for his
anybody.
light. He's
Yes,
found his light. His light is Ellie.
no one's going to hurt his baby girl or take his daughter away from him ever again.
So he gets to the surgery room. By the way, the cinematography and the use of showing, not telling is phenomenal.
Yeah,
Did you notice why he stopped the first time? He stopped when he's taken away.
explain.
He's looking at the floors, and they show the floor 6, pediatric surgery.
Yeah. Also, way to go, HBO, for continuing my fear of hospitals, specifically children's hospitals. This place was terrible. Like that giraffe, like the elephant and the flamingos. It was the scariest thing I've ever seen. It's like, why did you make this place look so creepy?
But I love how the this feels like the game, like the hospital feels like a location, like it should, right?
Right.
Which again is a very hard thing to do because a lot of times you can sneak in a piece, but that the whole set feels like the location. I think it was very remarkable. Um, but when he gets to floor 6, he's taken everyone down. He goes into the surgery room and he says, "Untie her." And the doctor stands there, which, by the way, as soon as you put this picture, bro, I thought this was a still from the episode. That's how good the episode was. This is a still from the game.
Yes, it's a still from the game, and it's an iconic moment. It
Yeah.
looks identical. It plays out pretty much the exact same way.
Right.
Um, but yeah, this is
Yeah.
the reason I'm using this game still. One, we don't have access to the official still yet,
True.
but two, it there's no point in me using one from the show because we're talking about how they recreated this moment, and it's iconic at this point.
Right. And he kills the doctor that tries to defend Ellie with, you know,
Yeah, he's got a little
a
scalpel in his
scalpel.
hand. There's not much he can do here.
He threatens the nurses after he kills the doctor, takes Ellie away, and then we have another powerful encounter between Joel and Marlene, where Marlene says, "You can save her from this, but the world is broken. At some point, you're gonna die, and she's gonna fall to raiders." In the game, she literally goes to say that similar things to what we saw with David can happen as well. Like she
Hmm.
alludes to that, like it's get like the worst thing that could happen to a young girl can still happen in this world, right? Which to me, it's not the greatest argument because that can happen in any world, post-apocalypse or no, sadly. But at the
Yeah,
same, but at
it
the same,
works for good. Sorry.
no, no. But I love how it builds to the point that she goes, "What would she have wanted?" Which is funny because apart from the fact that Marlene already took the shows away from her, right? He's still
Hmm.
challenging Jill with that final thing because she knows what she did.
Yeah,
And then he finds out that both of them know they're doing the wrong thing by taking the choice away. And you got to think about it. If we would have just talked to her, would we have had the same outcome?
that's been the biggest question
Yep.
Last of Us fans have been asking the entire
Yep.
time since this game has existed, Brandon. So that's
Yep.
very, very good question. I
Yes.
love how in this moment, though, you're right. We highlight that they are both hypocrites.
Yep.
They're both stealing the choice away from Ellie. And one thing, again, going back to the added dialogue, the added scenes that they put in this episode, when Ellie says it can't all be for nothing,
Yep.
she wants to make sure that she gets this done. We kind of know what her answer would have been.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
that's what makes this even worse is
We
that,
know what the answer is because she already told us
yeah.
after watching the giraffe, right?
Hmm.
And then I love how Ali Abazi, because being the director, right?
Yeah.
We know that we've seen it so far. Craig and Neil trust the directors they've picked. They're not there just to be Marvel pawns. So I'm sorry, it just fits, right? Sorry, I love Marvel, but we know.
Yeah,
Um,
he ain't wrong.
but the fact that he chose to edit it just like the game, I think that was a big deal because the encounter occurs. We don't know the outcome of that conversation, but we see Joel in the car driving, and we kind
Yes.
of get the sense of maybe Joel, got convinced. But then you hear Ellie wake up, and then he lies. They were running some
Yeah.
tests. The drugs are wearing out.
This is
It,
how long do you think he cooked up this lie, man? It is
it's
so
it's
layered.
he's kind of developing it as he goes, right? Like
Yeah.
it's and then he goes and says they've been trying. They have plenty of people like you. They've been trying to find a cure. They've kind of given up on finding a cure because I mean you're not the only one. Which the story, not Marlene, not Marlene. The story has shown us that she is the only one. You know what I mean?
Yeah, without a
We
doubt.
exactly. The story has done that.
In this very episode, like we said a few times now, you can't recreate this
Right.
event
Right.
ever again. It's so
Right.
yeah.
So she does. And then she asks questions, and then he says, "Where are my clothes?" He says, "Raiders attacked the hospital. I barely got you out of her alive." And you can see Bella Ramsey is just so freaking good. You can kind of see that her brain is already saying bullshit. You know what I mean? Like you
That
can
yeah. I
at
love
that
how her performance she has that, but also she's still playing groggy. I'm just waking up Ellie. So she's
yes,
just kind of like, what?
yes. And she
Okay.
goes, "Where people hurt." Yes. And then she asked the question, which I missed the first time, which doesn't occur in the game. It happens here. And to me was like, yo, did you
Twist
cast
the
up?
knife.
Did you hear the last question?
Yeah.
Is
The one
Marlene
about
okay?
Marlene, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Is Marlene okay?
Yeah.
And then he just says, I'm taking us home. And then we cut back and he
Yeah.
shoots Marlene. And
Not
when he
just that, she's on the ground. Like,
no, but he
at least,
shoots her first,
yeah.
right? And that's what makes it so dramatic. Going to what you're saying, he
Mhm.
shoots her. How many times has she been shot in the abdomen now? Twice?
This is at least twice.
There's at least that we know of.
Right.
He puts Ellie in the car. He hears her groaning in pain and he goes back.
They'll just come after her.
Bro. And now and you're kind of understanding the mentality now of why he did what he did to everybody else he killed.
Right.
It's the same idea. You'll just come after her because all you guys are fanatics. You know what I mean? Like you're just
Mhm.
gonna come looking for her because she's the cure or whatever.
If you take down the Queen Firefly, you probably neutralize the threat. Right. It's heavy. And just going back, we'll talk about part two spoilers in a bit, I guess. I don't
Eh,
want to ruin that
I
now.
don't I don't think this is the episode for that because I would say the best thing to do, and if you guys want a spoiler conversation about part two, let us know in the comments below. Who knows? We might get a crew together and talk about the game. Just saying. Let us know if you want that, and we'll give it to you.
While we're
Um,
talking to the audience, like and subscribe if you enjoy this conversation so far.
yes.
It's kind of
So
hard for us to plug that while we're talking.
yeah, and also like and subscribe so that when we do that part two review, you can see it.
Right.
Um, but yeah,
But yeah,
I think once they start announcing casting, we can probably jump in and do that.
yeah, there's just a specific thing that they shot, the way that they shot some of the scenes here, that it's like, yeah, okay, I know what you're doing. You're already setting the
Oh
groundwork,
yeah,
the foundation of
yes.
what's going to happen later.
Something in
I
that
won't.
surgery room.
Yeah,
Yes,
we're
yes,
not going to
100%.
talk about that in depth, but
Uh,
you get it.
yeah,
We we get to that moment, right? You were saying about jumping forward in time a bit from that car scene.
yep.
And I love how, again, Ellie kind of returns to who she was at the start of this episode, very quiet, very somber. And she's still rerunning everything back in her head of like what happened and why isn't Joel being honest with her? Like they've been together to the point where she can call him out on his crap, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Maria's advice is probably eating at her right now.
yes.
The only people that can betray you are those that you trust.
Yeah.
It's,
Seriously.
yeah. And so she's moving, right? She's moving. It's another 5 hour hike. We can make that. It's a joke. Joel is still playing super dad. Ellie's back to quiet, but it's a different kind of quiet because you know that she's building up the courage to confront this man that she has grown to love as a role model or parental figure, right? I love how clear the roles are too. Like I love like there's no, you know what I mean? I love how clear the father role relationship is, father
Yeah.
daughter, and she's building the courage to ask the question because, and here's what makes it so complicated because what is Ellie's biggest fear? To end up alone.
Right.
What if she asks the question or directs the question the wrong way and she loses Joel? What does
Yeah.
life look like? You know what I mean? So she's finding the courage to talk about this, to bring it up. And they
I
get in
want to, before we get to that point though, I want
good.
to
Good.
go from Joel's point of view,
Oh,
right?
Joyce is the other version.
Combining the two words, my mistake. Joel's point of view.
Yes.
It is, can we talk about how disturbing it is by how happy he is in these final moments?
Yeah.
Like, like the only regret that it feels like is that he's lying to Ellie. He has no
Yeah.
regrets about what he actually did.
Because he's a protector, just like Bill.
Yeah.
Because he fulfilled his purpose, just like Bill.
Yeah, like there's no
Yeah.
second guessing, there's no thoughts. He's going on about how me and Sarah used to go on hikes all the time. She didn't quite like it that much, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And it's like you two would have been great friends. And like
Yeah.
he's just reminiscing about like this is the first time he's actually talking about Sarah without breaking up.
Yep.
Like he's officially gotten to the point where he's accepted that she's gone,
Yep.
and now he can think of the good times he had with her while talking about them with Ellie. And it's one of the most heartwarming moments you can get, but it is just shrouded in darkness. And
Yes.
it's such a weird like juxtaposition of how they frame that scene. That's why the ending of this game, the ending of this show will forever fascinate me. Like how can you get into the mindset of Joel and be okay with anything that has happened?
And because we've built these characters in such a phenomenal way,
Mhm.
we're feeling how disconnected they are. You know what I mean? Like we
Yeah.
feel we feel Joel's excitement and joy because he saved her. But we also see Ellie's pain because everybody knows that he's lying. It's not something that they're trying to hide because we know that Ellie sees through it.
Yeah.
Just like she saw through it, just like she saw through Riley. Ellie is seeing through Joel. And that's the heartbreaking thing because when she finally talks about Riley, which again, I still say episode 7 was phenomenal and 100% a necessity because it really adds the layer of emotion needed for this moment. Like
Yeah.
it just continues. Like I love how you know that the storytelling has been phenomenal when every single moment in the story literally has built up to these final 5 minutes. It's all built it to that, you know.
Right.
And then you have you have that moment where she goes, when I got bit in the mall, I wasn't alone. I was with my friend Riley and we both got bit. And she said, let's be poetic and let's just go crazy together. But when she turned and I didn't, I had to. And she was the first one to die. And then she goes and goes and goes. And it's just like everything that she's been digesting in her soul from the beginning of the episode,
Yeah.
it's coming out now. And then Joel goes on this parental tangent that you always find something to fight for, right? And then she breaks the conversation and says the famous words, swear to me, swear to me that everything you've told me about the Fireflies is true.
Yeah.
And he says, I swear, with almost no hesitation. And I love how Pedro gives you like a little bit, like it's very small,
Yeah.
but almost no hesitation. And then you have Ellie accepting the lie. She's not happy, but she kind of accepts the lie. And I love how the musical cue of the fluttering of the strings is literally identical as in the game.
Hmm.
And it does the thing. She
Yeah.
says, okay, and it cuts to black. Ba-da-da-da-da. Bum-ba-dum-ding-dum-dum.
I wonder what that's gonna lead to.
Da-da. Yeah, and the crazy thing is, it's like there's no happy ever after.
No.
Like the end of the journey, what we know to be the journey so far, because remember, when this game came out, it took them 6 years, 7 years to come out with a sequel because part two came out what, 2020 or 2019?
Came out 2020.
2020. So, and we
7
never,
years.
and we did, and it wasn't even announced till 2017, right? Or
Yeah.
something like that. But you could end the show here and that's it, and it would still be, you know. But where's this relationship going now? What's gonna happen?
Yeah.
Um,
I
uh,
want your opinion because I know we're getting towards the end of the conversation, but
yeah.
upon first viewing, I didn't like this ending. Not because not my first time playing the game. I mean, like in the show, it didn't feel like a natural stopping point for the show. You
Okay.
know, like in the game, it kind of makes sense because you've been playing for like 20 hours trying to get through all this, and so when you finally get a moment to settle down from everything that's happened and you end on that conversation, it feels a lot more powerful, if that makes
Hmm.
sense.
Hmm.
In the show itself, it felt kind of abrupt. You know, like the game was able to pull that off because I just had like a 20-minute action sequence in between cutscenes. Here, and again, second viewing, it played a lot better. It felt a lot smoother of a transition, and so I'm cool with it. But like, what were your thoughts on having the same cut as she says okay, and that is just the end? We don't see where they go. It just ends here.
So it's funny because it was similar to my first viewing at episode 8.
Mm,
Like the cut I loved because it was an Easter egg, because it was identical. So I did love that. I love the fidelity of it, but to me, it was one of those episodes where I had to detox from everything that I knew about the game and the gameplay to truly embrace it. And the second time I saw it, I loved the episode, and I love how it ends because there's no other way it can end. It needs to, because it's not about the ending is not about what happens next. It's about the decision that these two characters make. He chooses to lie, and she chooses to believe it,
yeah.
for good or worse. And it's a perfect place to stop because now we know that season 2, one of the main driving forces of season 2, which the great thing about part 2 is that it's not just about this. There's a lot more that goes on, but I love
Oh yeah.
how one of the major plot lines has to do with the effect that the lie has, the consequences, and what it brings to their relationship that cost them so much pain, so much suffering, so much hurt to build. With So it's perfect.
Yeah.
Like I still feel that if the show ends here, I'm good. Like, which is the same reaction that I get from the game, right?
Hmm.
So I think that's the biggest thing. Like, if for whatever reason they don't announce a sequel or it wasn't renewed, I'd be like, okay, they did what they needed to do. They did the thing. I'm happy.
That's the benefit of them being able to get the entire first game done. Is that
Which I think is the
you know?
biggest thing, right? Like
Yeah.
the fact that they set out to do the thing. They set out to get part 1 done and closed. It gives me a lot more confidence because it's funny that I never quite understood how big part 2 is until I saw the show.
Yes.
Like, once I saw the show and saw that they were able to fit it in a very realistic manner in 9 episodes, we're talking about maybe 15 hours of content because some of them are longer than others, right?
Hmm.
The fact that they were able to fit all that, and then I think about all the moving pieces of part 2, I can see how they can get 2 to 3 seasons out of part 2 alone. And
Yeah, and part two is definitely, I think, can get 2 seasons worth of content from it
yeah,
at the very least.
yeah,
You kind of just have to think about what games were like back during that era, because The Last of Us felt like a big game in 2013.
yeah,
But then, I think it was like, if you count the Left Behind DLC, it's like 16, 17 hours ish.
yeah,
But then you get to Uncharted 4, you get to God of War, you get to Spider-Man. These are big, like 24 to 30-hour campaigns. Same thing with The Last of Us Part 2. The Last of Us Part 2 is probably a good 25, 30 hours of
yeah,
story.
yeah.
That's like almost double what the original game was. So yeah, you can
Right.
definitely do 2 seasons worth at the very least. And then who knows, by the time they get done with season 3, finishing part 2, we might have The Last of Us Part 3. Who knows?
Which again, I mean, I think one of the greatest testaments of how great the season one
Mhm.
is that just like the game, if it ends here, it ends here. It's meant to end in this somewhat of a tragedy, which is why it makes the ending so heartfelt and strong to swallow, and kind of like it leaves you feeling like you're not supposed to walk away from this feeling happy,
Yeah.
but also sets the tone about if people thought this ending was controversial. There's a lot that happens in part two, but
Right.
it doesn't come out of nowhere. It is the same heavy story driven mindset, right? Of exploring this world in this sincere and grounded way. And I think that's what a lot of people hated. A lot of people hated part two, but loved playing it. A lot of people hated playing it and loved the story. A lot of people just hated it and never finished it. I'm one of the ones that I played it more than once when it came out. I loved it because of because of the themes and how masterfully they tell the story. I was able to play it and stream it from one of my friends, the whole thing, and he didn't like it. But I understand why. And the idea that it forces you to have these conversations. It's I think that's the biggest thing of an art piece, right? That it forces you to start a podcast called Beyond the Clickers and talk about it.
You know what? Props to we're gonna do a victory lap. First off, thank you to Brett for joining us for the majority of the show. It's been an honor hanging out with you. Same with you,
Hello,
Jesse, for
Vita.
joining us. Hey, Vita. Thank you, Christian. Thank you, Ren. I want to just give a victory lap right quick because Beyond the Clickers, first off, great name because there's hardly any clickers in this dang show. So it paid off.
Yes.
But two, it's just been a blast talking with the chat when we do live. We're gonna be live on Tuesday, breaking down all of season one. We're gonna have some guests on. It's gonna be a great time. So this is not the last episode, and we will be
Yeah.
back talking part
Yes.
two,
Yep.
talking the next season. So much fun stuff. It's been
Yep.
great hanging out, Brandon, as always.
It's almost love it, love it, love it. It's been great, guys. Let us know your thoughts. This is not going to be a live episode, but please let us know in the comments what you thought about episode 9 of The Last of Us, the finale of season 1. Please do not give out any spoilers of part 2. We'll make a video just for that so you can talk about spoilers with us, but don't
Yep.
do it now. Be nice with everybody on the chat. That is only show only. Hope you guys loved it. If you guys hated the ending, let us know. If you guys love the ending, let us know. If you have any particular questions and things you want us to answer, whether in the form of a short, whether a short video essay or another conversation like this, maybe you guys can ask questions and we can do like a Q&A thing, and we'll answer all your questions with our theories or whatever. That would be also very fun. But thank you for joining us on this ride as we seek the art beyond the clickers. And I got to leave you with something. It's something simple, something great. But I think that from now on, we've done it for 10 episodes. It's going to keep on going. So I'm going to leave you with these words. As the great Savage Starlight would say, endure and survive.
Survive.
Have it awesome, guys. Peace.
Peace.